Yo, what's up? So this is a jump jet guide to front-end technical interviews. We're going through a bunch of questions that you're likely going to come across when you're going for a web developer job. And for this episode, we're going to go through Quirks Mode. So you might get the question, what is Quirks Mode? Essentially, this is related to the doc type of an HTML page. At the top of an HTML page, you'll have a doc type definition, and that tells the browser how to lay out the web page according to certain rules. Now, there's kind of a long history about Quirks mode and standards mode, and it goes back to the days of Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer. So this was like the Wild West days of the web, and there weren't standards, or the standards weren't followed on how to write CSS or HTML layouts. And so basically the two different browsers at the time had slightly different rules. So if you would write a web page to display itself on Netscape Navigator, it might look funny on Internet Explorer and vice versa. Over time, luckily, modern web browsers interpret the standards CSS, which are defined by the W3C. But at the time, a lot of web pages were written using these very idiosyncratic CSS rules. So browsers needed to be able to display a web page using two different kind of modes. One was the standards mode, so that's like the traditional valid CSS, but the other is Quirks mode, and that meant that the browser needed to be able to interpret these funny little CSS rules that people had written at the time. So Quirks mode, I guess, is becoming less and less relevant as modern web pages are all adhere to the valid kind of doc type and layout, but they still have to be able to understand if a web page is written using the Quirks mode rules. Let's see here. There is actually a little extra in there. So if you get this question in an interview, you can go through Quirks mode and standards mode and the difference between the two. Standards mode is also known as strict mode. But there's also actually a third one that is just weird and in the middle, and it's actually called almost standards mode. You probably won't come across that too often, but you can throw that in during an interview and they'll know that you know what you're talking about. A good place to learn about Quirks mode and standards mode is, as usual, on Mozilla. So here they go through the difference between the two and how the browsers kind of determine how to lay out the page. There's also quirksmode.org, which is a good place to get a bit better of an idea about the history of Quirks mode, why it exists. For all intents and purposes, the rule of thumb these days is you want to use a standard doc type, you want to comply with standards mode. But for some reason, you might need to support a legacy project or something like that. It's good to know about Quirks mode and what it does. The rule of thumb generally is, if you don't know if you should use Quirks mode or not, don't use it. You just want to use the standard doc type. Something interesting is that if you visit a web page using, for example, Firefox, you can actually see the type of mode that the browser is interpreting the web page as. So if we go here, this is just reddit.com, but you can right click, go down to view page info, and you will see this here. There we go, the render mode. So this is using standards compliance mode. You will find that with most modern web pages, they're just using the standards, the modern strict standards. But it's good to know that you can check a web page and see how they're interpreting the layout of the page. So that's pretty much, if you give that as an answer in a front-end interview, I think you'll be pretty good. Yeah. So I think that basically covers it. Do more reading. This is kind of like an overview, but you can get a bit deeper into exactly what the differences are. But hopefully that helps you in an interview. And yeah, subscribe if you want to get more tips on how to master front end interviews. Okay, cheers.